Welcome to the Prodigal and the Priest podcast, a podcast about faith, sports, and two friends from different cultures. Here are your hosts, Joey Scansella and Father Paul Bechter.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you listen to this. No, they're probably not listening to us at night, but welcome to Prodigal and the Priest and me. This is our Friday edition where we answer those questions that you have. Maybe they've come up from different conversations we've had, maybe other questions. They're stirring in your heart. They're just burning within. Maybe you contemplated questions of faith during the snow apocalypse that hit Dallas. Whatever that may be, we would love to hear from you. Even we have people that just reach out and say thank you, or people that insult us.
Yeah,
we've had
great.
both. We've definitely had both.
Anything at all. We're that desperate. Any acknowledgments, whether insults.
My favorite one, I have to read it, is Patty listened to the episode.
Oh, good.
And so Patty said, "Hi, Joey and Father Paul. Thank you for answering the Byzantine question. In parentheses, so quickly. It was worth the wait. Keep up the great podcast, Patty. Patty, thank you for pushing us to go the extra mile and get that simple answer that took us several months. So anyway,
and then,
go ahead.
50-minute episode.
Yeah.
To answer.
And we probably cut that short. So if you would like to submit a question, one of multiple ways, reach us out to us on social media, our Gmail, Prodigal and the Priest, gmail.com, stannparish.org/PTP. If you know one of us, just ask us. I'll write it down. Whatever way you can get a hold of us, ask your questions. We're excited for them. So let's jump into it. Hello, I had a question, and this is anonymous. I had a question regarding past sins and confession. I keep remembering a ton of sins from the past. Sometimes they are serious, potentially mortal sins, but sometimes they're not super serious. I'm having trouble, though, because I'm remembering a bunch of sins from the past, so it takes me a long time to get ready for confession because I have to think through the past sins to tell if they were mortal sins or not. Is this necessary? Do you have any tips? Thanks. So this addresses a few different things. One is, what if you forgot? And we're not talking about omitted. Mm-hmm. Like Very if different. You purposely omitted a sin, that is a grave thing, and you have to go back and say...
it validates a confession.
Right. There is a difference, though, and like you to speak to it on somebody just forgot. They went to confession, they forgot something, or they didn't know it was a sin, right? Because remember, 3 things for a mortal sin. Grave matter, you know it's wrong, and you still commit that act, and you do it, right? So you have to have those things so that a mortal sin is truly present. So maybe speak a little bit to this question and just maybe the idea is, Father, that somebody forgets something. Mm-hmm. Does that mean they should say it next time? Shouldn't they? They didn't know something was a mortal sin way in their past.
Right.
What you got?
Okay, so what we got, first it's important to understand like conscience and how conscience works. Or actually, that's important, but I'm not going to start there. I changed my mind.
Faked you out.
Juke, jab step. The confessional is kind of like, I don't know, for whatever reason, even when people are used to coming to confession regularly, which I advise is like one of the most important things you can do for your spiritual life, a regular habit of confession. Even something like once a month or once every 3 months, like that's a really good habit to get into. But yeah, people forget all the time. It's so funny. It's not funny really, but like it kind of is. It's
not funny
how common it is that people walk in and then they'll be like, "Oh no, I just forgot everything." like I really did prepare, I promise.
Right.
And so sometimes people will write stuff down so they don't forget, and that's not a bad thing. But the basic thing is like, look, you confess, you have the obligation to prepare, and to prepare as well as you can, within reason, as well as you can. So not, a lifetime of preparation, but it's important to examine your conscience and actually know what you're going to say before you come in, and not just get in there and be like, well, I don't know, it's been a while and I can't really remember. It's like, well, you need to prepare before you come in. This is really important.
Yeah.
But once you're in there, like if you forget stuff, even if it's a mortal sin, like that's kind of okay. You have to confess.
Just forgetting.
Just forgetting.
Not omitting.
So you have to confess every mortal sin in number and kind, as much as you can remember the number. Sometimes people can't remember the number. There's too many, or it was too long ago and they're just not sure. So it's just like a lot. Okay, it's fine. So as best as you can, number and kind of mortal sins for everything that you can remember since your last confession. Now, the forgetting thing. What if I forgot something and then I remembered it right as soon as I walked out of the confessional or as soon as I got home? That happens all the time. With those, because you forgot it legitimately, like, that is forgiven. That God forgives you everything, as long as you're not hiding something that is a mortal sin on purpose, right? Because you're ashamed or for whatever reason, or you're just like, I know this is wrong, but I'm not sorry, so I'm not going to say it. Like, those are things that actually invalidate the confession, because you're not being honest with God, and God knows our hearts. And like, I don't know if you're not being honest with Him.
Right.
Sometimes you can kind of tell, and like I may ask a question, but I don't know your heart. Like no priest knows your heart,
right?
Unless they're given some special gift like Padre Pio and stuff like that. But even then, like God is the knower of hearts, and so like you have to be honest with Him, but not afraid, if that makes sense. Like Adam and Eve hid themselves after the fall, right? That's the response of that. Sin makes us want to hide from God. But God is the one who forgives us. He's the divine physician.
Right.
We have to show Him our wounds in order to be healed, and not hide them from Him. So anyway, to answer it simply, if you forget something in a confession and then you remember it later and it's a serious sin, bring it up in your next confession. You don't have to run to confession. It's already been forgiven. But in justice, right, to give God everything, to open those wounds up to the light so that they can be healed or something.
Right.
Like, it's important to bring that up later. That has to do with sins for your past life as well, right? Lived a wayward life, were Catholic or weren't Catholic or whatever, but didn't really practice your faith, have a conversion, start taking your faith seriously, and then you're like, what about, this whole, 25 or 30 years of my life where I was living a very sinful life, and, how could I possibly go through all that? I think with that, I don't know. This is just a suggestion, but I think it might be helpful. That might be a time to just keep a little notepad with you. And when you remember something, just to jot it down. It doesn't have to be the full details of it, just number and kind, right?
Yeah.
And then to bring those up when you come into confession, it's helpful for the confessor if you distinguish. You're like, okay, these are my sins since my last confession, and also I'd like to confess this from my past life. You can do that. That's an important thing in justice.
Right.
But those sins have been forgiven. It's not like the confession was sort of conditional upon you remembering this later.
Right.
You are truly forgiven when you confess everything that you can remember.
Right. Which brings up a
mortal sins. You don't have to confess all your venial sins. It's a good habit to confess particular venial sins that you struggle with, but that's an important thing, I think. We're not talking about even the just man falls 7 times a day.
Yeah.
And that's what Scripture says anyway. And you don't have to list off every single thing that you've done since your last confession.
Yeah.
Just the mortal sins.
Right. Now, it brings up a good question that actually, like a follow-up to this one that was asked. And first off, thank you for whoever asked it. Me and a friend were talking. We had been watching a series by Father Dave Pavanka, the one on metanoia, on conversion.
Ooh.
It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, for our listeners, it's from 4 p.m. Media, the Wild Goose production. So Father Dave does a series on the Holy Spirit. This one's on conversion. And there are different testimonies in it. And one man speaks about something that I've always struggled a little bit on the theology of, which is a general confession.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on it, so I kind of want to dig deeper a little bit there. And for our listeners who don't know, there's something that some people maybe on a retreat or different things, they'll do what's called a general confession. And pretty much it is, all those big things in your life ever from as far back as you can remember. I mean, pages upon pages that you would write down and kind of go through. I struggle theology-wise because I'm like, well, these have been forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of like, wouldn't you call it more of a general meditation of your sins instead of general confession? You know what I'm getting at?
No, it's a weird thing. So theologically, it's a weird thing, but it's a good thing. But it's you're right to say, like, I struggle with understanding this because, like, once a sin is forgiven, it's forgiven.
Right. So why am I going to
why
confession
bring it up
for?
Again
yeah, like
in confession. But the theology of the church and also the practice of the church, which helps us see, like, we're unpacking that theologically, the tradition of our church, is that you can resubmit sins in the confession for this declaration of forgiveness. And it doesn't mean that they weren't forgiven before, and that's why it's kind of a little odd.
right.
And so it's important, like, a lot of people struggle with scruples, where they struggle to feel like they've actually been forgiven.
Right.
And that'll make them want to, maybe I didn't make the confession good enough, and I have to go and do it again and keep doing it until I feel forgiven. Like, the feeling of forgiveness, depending on what your past is like,
right,
that can take a lifetime to sink in, because the feelings, I don't know, they're just working on a different level. They're not rational.
Right.
Feelings are by definition
right.
irrational. And so, like, yeah, when people have habits of sin that they're struggling with, like, even if they haven't committed that particular sin, say a sin against purity, right?
Yeah.
Our world is so set up right now in this diabolical way to tempt people towards impurity, and to make a lot of them feel like it's almost impossible to stay pure. That's something that a lot of people struggle with. So, sins against purity. Say someone has remained chaste since their last confession, but they know that they're struggling with this vice, this habit of impurity. It's not bad for them to say at the end of the confession, and for all of my past sins against purity.
Right.
Like, that's submitting this thing to receive a particular grace. It's bringing it back into the light, being like, I know it's forgiven, but I've still got scar tissue.
Right.
And that's kind of what the general confession is trying to do as well. Like, yes, you've been forgiven, but there is another step after forgiveness called sanctification, where God transforms us.
Right.
And that forgiveness seeps into every aspect of our life.
I can see that.
And so it can be helpful.
But if you never do it either, you're good too.
Yeah, you're okay. You're okay. It's something you would do at a particularly big point of your life.
Right.
And just one more point on that, like, it's also not something that you should do in the normal confessional line, because, like, I've had that happen before, where somebody will come in and normally when someone has worked themselves up to make a general confession, it's a pretty big deal for them.
Yeah.
So
and can take quite a bit of time.
Yeah, it can take quite a bit of time, but like emotionally, they've built this moment up, and so it becomes this kind of hard thing where that there's probably like 20 people in the line behind them because at St. Anne, like our confession lines are huge.
We got a lot of sinners in Capel.
Right. But at the same time, you don't want to say like, "Hey, come back and make an appointment." You're just kind of stuck, and so it's like, all right, this is a huge moment of grace, and so like, but it shouldn't happen like that. Like general confession should be something that you make an appointment for,
right? Or like you said, I've
because it
seen
takes a
on
while.
silent retreats with personal spiritual directors,
Exactly,
different things
that
like
kind of
that.
thing.
Yeah.
So, but then last note on that,
Yeah.
we do not have enough priests, not even close, in our diocese. When I entered seminary, I don't know what the stats are now, but when I entered seminary, our ratio of priests to Catholics was the second worst in the country, next to
in
LA.
Dallas, you're talking.
Yeah, Dallas. We have a ton of Catholics in our diocese, and we only have like 170 priests. And our seminarians, like, things are going well, but we have to recognize that. And so that makes it very hard for diocesan priests to have enough time to do the kind of spiritual direction, including things like general confessions, appointments for that are, I don't know, just to pull back the curtain, like parish priests have to do a lot of triage work, right? In a hospital, when multiple people come in at the same time into the ER, you have to determine like who needs to be seen first. And something like a general confession, that's a beautiful spiritual practice. I don't want to discourage that, but I also want to say like there are other things that we have to do first when we have such a shortage of priests. And it can be hard for priests to provide spiritual direction for the whole parish in that way.
Yeah, if you take that general number you just gave me by the 1.2 million Catholics in Dallas, just in Dallas, that's about 7,000 per priest.
Yeah. And
now, not all.
I think that number has gone up quite a bit.
Right.
And I think the number of priests has about stayed stable because a lot are retiring. We do have a lot more seminarians than we did back when I joined seminary.
Yeah.
But I think we're just, I don't think we're increasing our numbers of priests.
Right. Right. Good point. Good point.
Yeah,
all
good
right.
question.
Next question. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Wait, I asked that. Great question to me. Thank you. Next one, just as deep. Do y'all eat the end slice of the bread in a loaf of bread?
Yes.
Do you eat the end slice of the bread? Yes, it's one of my favorites actually.
Depends on the loaf.
Really, any loaf, even just store stocked, like that piece toasted on the end, kind of curls up, extra crunchy. Yeah, all day. You?
Yes, I eat it, but I'm not as gung-ho about it as you are.
I mean, on a
the
fresh loaf of like Italian bread.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the heel.
100%, yes.
Money.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. If you're talking about like sliced bread from the grocery store,
yeah,
like whatever, it's fine. I'll eat it. It's not my favorite piece. Excuse me. COVID. That's not okay to joke about.
No, not okay. And he's already had COVID.
Yeah, that's right. But on a good loaf of bread, I've been baking a lot more bread. That's
I did hear about that.
You heard about it?
Well, you told me.
Yeah, I told you.
I was trying to act all cool. I heard about you baking bread, but
my mom taught me how to bake when I was younger. She's a very good cook and a very good baker. I think if we had lived in a different country where she was in Bermuda, you're not able to set up just a small business on your own as a non-Bermudian. And so we were expats. And so she would have had to get a work permit. But like she, in a different world, she would have started a bakery, that kind of thing. And like she taught me how to bake, and I was never able to do that much of it during seminary because we just always had food provided and everything. And then when I got here for the past 2 years, I've been like, oh, I'm too busy. Like it takes too much time. I've started making time for it because it's one of these things where it's like, I could do so much more with this time, but if I think like that all the time, I'm gonna burn myself out.
Yeah.
Like, it's most important to think like that with prayer. Like, this is more important than whatever else I could be doing. But also with some hobbies, and so like bread making, I've started. Yeah.
Is there a certain one you go for?
Yeah, I've started making like the Jewish challah bread. As a weekly
I know,
thing.
I couldn't remember the word. I was like, matzah.
Yeah, it looks like challah when you read it, but it's challah is how you say it. And so that's been kind of a fun thing, and I had to learn how to braid for the first time because it's a braided loaf. And I never knew how to
I'll
braid.
have you come braid Fran's hair.
Yeah, that'd be weird.
Do the Elsa and Anna braid. That's what they say nowadays. I know you're unfamiliar still with the
Frozen.
references.
I do know it's from Frozen
so
now.
When,
I don't know
when
what their
she
braid
goes
looks
and
like.
gets like her hair done, or somebody is at the house and knows how to do it, or Nikki does it, or whoever does it, you pretty much nowadays, because that it's been so iconic for girls, Frozen, they say, do you want Anna or Elsa? Anna has two braids to the side, Elsa one braid down the middle.
Is it different than pigtails?
Yeah, pigtails are just like tight, and you like.
They're like a ponytail on the side of your head.
Yes, we've now digressed from bread,
I don't know what's going on. But I've also been making other bread.
You should do semolina. I love semolina bread.
Yeah.
Do you like it? It's like a yellowish
it's a particular
bread.
flour.
Yeah, you got it.
Semolina
So
is-
good.
Yeah.
It's in New Jersey.
She taught me
a
how
lot,
to make
so.
pizza. I used to make focaccia and pizza dough, and like those are really good. But I've been making this quick, sort of very hearty whole wheat bread lately. It's good stuff.
Good stuff. All right, next question. This one a little late, just because with not being able to film in that, but I think it's a good one. Chris asked two different questions, so one is a little bit shorter, one a little bit longer, I'm sure. Joey, Father Paul, what do you? Why do you think there is a year of Saint Joseph this year? Joey, is that who you're named after? Would you guys also consider mentioning the consecration to promoting it? So it did start on February the 15th, consecration to Saint Joseph. I'm doing it with my wife. It's awesome. You're doing it, right?
I'm also doing it just by myself.
It's by Father Donald Calloway.
Calloway. Yeah. I always call him Father Michael Gately, who is another
he does
author
the
who writes
33 Days to
consecration
Morning
books.
Glory.
Yeah.
So
but this is Father Donald Calloway, MIC. That's his religious order.
He was in Steubenville when I went there and went to a decent amount of. They have a house in Steubenville. Went to a decent amount of masses with him. Cool guy. Cool story. Cool.
Yeah, I've heard his story actually. I heard him speak once.
Yeah, he's got involved with like the Chinese mafia and huge different stuff. Yeah. So, all that to be said is I'll be completely honest. I don't know who my parents named me after. I know Joe's a popular Italian name. I don't know if they were like, Saint Joseph. I love my parents. I think they love the faith, but I don't know if they're like, yes, we have a devotion to Saint Joseph. Compared to our kids, we're like, we have a devotion to Saint Francis, Francesca, Sophia. We're wise people, wisdom, wisdom. We love Saint Clare, Chiara, or Dominic, who my wife thought we were naming him after the Dominican. I thought we were naming him after Saint Dominic Savio. So it worked both ways. We celebrate. So all that to be said, why do we think there is a year of Saint Joseph? And yes, do the consecration.
Yeah, do the consecration. It's really nice. I'm reading through that book right now. And we said it started on February 15th, but that's if you're doing the consecration on the Solemnity of St. Joseph,
March 19th.
which is March 19th. He gives several starting dates throughout the year.
Because there's one for May 1st, too, for
Exactly.
St. Joseph. So if
that
you
one's
haven't
coming
done
up.
it.
Yeah. Or it's okay to jump in halfway.
Yeah.
It's fine. We're not even halfway. We're like a weekend. But that's okay. You can do some 2-a-days or something if you want to go through all the material. But the whole point is just to you could just make a consecration on the day. Say this is the year of St. Joseph. I'm going to consecrate myself. But his argument is, well, why not spend 33 days before that, or a period of time before that, learning about St. Joseph,
right?
About whom so little is known, and in the history of the church, like the spotlight hasn't always been on him.
Right.
So it's a nice thing. Why a year of Saint Joseph?
I have a thought. If you have a thought,
you go ahead. I want to hear your thought.
And I don't know if Pope Francis intentionally, I mean, he's a smart guy. He probably did. But I think that we are living in the worst times of fatherless generations.
Yeah, I agree. Same thought.
That there's not many father figures. Many biological fathers have abandoned their children. And we need to know we have a spiritual father in St. Joseph. In the same way, it's easy for us a lot to go to Mary as our spiritual mother if we don't have a relationship with our mom, or it's not good, or maybe she's passed. We seem to just make that connection easy. I don't think we make it as much with St. Joseph and as a father. And I think that's what it boils down to, that we're dealing with a fatherless generation.
Yeah, and we see the social fallout from that in so many ways. Like the breakdown of the family is the significant contributor to a lot of the social ills that we're struggling with right now.
Yeah.
And that in particular, what we're talking about is fatherless families.
Yeah.
And so like St. Joseph, he's just
he's the man.
He's the man. And so he's the man for people who are struggling with the sort of fatherless situation. He's the man for fathers who are like, I don't know how to be a father. I need an example. He's the man for like, as a spiritual complement to our natural fathers here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a really good thing, and it does seem really fitting right now. And I was really pleased. Like, I've for several years now, and I think I mentioned this before on the podcast, for several years, I, together with a group of some priest friends, have like tried to foster some devotion to Saint Joseph amongst ourselves.
Right.
And for me, what that's looked like is every Wednesday evening chanting the Litany of Saint Joseph.
Yeah.
And I was really pleased to see in that book, with his consecration, the 33-day consecration, that is like, that's sort of the recurring prayer.
Yeah, every
that you're
day
saying
you pray
every
the
day.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I think it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Y'all should look into that book. You can get it on Kindle if you're into that. It took me a while to order it because I think it's really popular right now. Right. So it took a while to get in, but
right. Yeah,
I've really been happy with it so far.
Yeah, and we did, I think, an episode on St. Joseph. We probably talked. Sometimes people will be like, "Hey, you already answered that question." I'm like, "Okay,
whatever.
Cool.
I don't remember anything."
I don't. besides things in Latin and other languages.
Well, I forgot how to say
like that.
I forgot how to say the sign of the cross in Latin the other day, which is something I've done so much. Like, I was like, is it Spiritus Sancti or is it Spiritui Sancto? And I had to think about declensions and stuff. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so, I don't know, brain is just not all there right now.
It's foggy.
It's foggy. It's still defrosting after the ice.
The blizzard, as you texted me a few times.
Yeah.
I was like, anybody who's actually experienced a blizzard is just so insulted by that comment.
This was tragic. It was a crisis, but it wasn't a blizzard.
True. Yes, and we have sympathy for all those going who went without power and water and busted pipes and all that. But in the north, I mean, a true blizzard. That's been, that's crazy. I think we got 4 feet when I was in '96. So, on behalf of Joey Scansella, Father Paul Bechter, we want to say take care.
God bless.